You're listening to Full Circle Weekly news of the open source community presented by Full Circle Magazine. These articles are compiled by Eric the Unready, and I'm your host, Moss Bliss. This is episode 397, covering week 3, January 13th to 19th, 2025. MX Linux 23.5 has been released, the collaboration between the communities formed around the Anti-X and Mepis projects. The release is based on Debian with improvements from the Anti-X project and packages from its own repository. The distribution uses sysvinit and its own tools for configuring and deploying the system, 32 and 64-bit builds with the XFCE desktop, as well as 64-bit builds with the KDE desktop and builds with Fluxbox Window Manager are available for download. OpenZFS 2.3.0 has been released for Linux and FreeBSD. The project became known as ZFS on Linux and was previously limited to developing a module for the Linux kernel, but after merging the code from FreeBSD's version, it was recognized as the main implementation of OpenZFS. OpenZFS has been tested with Linux kernels from 4.18 to 6.12 and all FreeBSD branches starting with 13.3. The code is distributed under the free CDDL license. OpenZFS is already used in FreeBSD and is included in Debian, Ubuntu, Gentoo, NixOS, and Alt Linux distributions. Packages with this new version are being prepared for the main Linux distributions, including Debian, Ubuntu, Fedora, RHEL, and CentOS. OpenZFS provides an implementation of ZFS components related to both the file system and the volume manager. The implemented components are SPA, Storage Pool Allocator, DMU, Data Management Unit, ZVOL, ZFS Emulated Volume, and ZPL, ZFS POSIX Layer. The project also allows using ZFS as a backend for the Lustre cluster file system. OpenZFS is being developed with the participation of Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory employees under a contract with the U.S. Department of Energy. The CDDL license is incompatible with GPL v2, which prevents ZFS from being integrated into the main Linux kernel branch, since mixing code under GPL v2 and CDDL licenses is not compatible. To circumvent the license incompatibility, it was decided to distribute the product for Linux entirely under the CDDL license as a separately loadable module, delivered separately from the kernel. The stability of OpenZFS is estimated to be comparable to other file systems for Linux. Linus Torvalds announced the 6.13 branch testing will likely be extended by a week due to stability issues with changes prepared by a Microsoft employee and accepted in the 6.13 branch in November. It is also noted that the patch that caused the crash was submitted in a non-standard way, but was accepted despite not receiving a single acknowledgement from the x86 maintainers, which is a violation of generally accepted practices. The patch added the ability to use large memory pages in ROX, read-only execute, mode when allocating memory intended for executable code. ROX allows using memory with executable code in read-only mode, which complicates the exploitation of some vulnerabilities. In the 6.13 kernel, the use of a cache of large executable memory pages, reflected as ROX, was enabled by default for executable code of modules on x86-64 systems. The change solved the problem with mapping in ROX mode of pages for executable code that was not yet fully formed, and made it possible to do so without temporary remapping of ROX pages to write mode until kernel modules were ready for operation. During the final testing of the 6.13 kernel, an engineer from Intel found a bug that prevented the kernel from correctly waking up from sleep mode on some laptops with Intel Alder Lake processors and others. The bug occurred when building the kernel with the Clang compiler with the CFI, Control Flow Integrity, protection mode enabled, which blocks violations of the normal execution order, Control Flow, as a result of using exploits that modify function pointers stored in memory. As a temporary solution, the maintainers from Intel and AMD, responsible for the x86 architecture, proposed disabling the use of execmem_ROX in the 6.13 kernel until a full patch is prepared and tested that solves the problem. The GNOME project developers have accepted the minimalist music player Decibels into the core GNOME desktop environment. Decibels will be shipped in the spring release of GNOME 48 under the name Audio Player. Last year, the player was already accepted into the basic distribution of Endless OS and was also included by default in the GNOME editions of the Postmarket OS smartphone distribution. Decibels is written in TypeScript using JavaScript bindings over GStreamer, libadwaita, Go, Gobject, and GTK4, and is distributed under the AGPL v3 license. Ready-made packages are available in Flatpak format. The program has a very simple interface optimized for playing individual audio files when trying to open them in other applications, such as a file manager or email client. The window visualizes the sound waveform, has a slider for quickly changing the position, a playback speed switch, a volume control, and buttons for fast forwarding and rewinding by 5 and 10 seconds. Dark and light modes are supported. The interface is universal and adapts to both large PC and laptop screens and narrow touch screens of smartphones. CUDA Text 1.220.6, the cross-platform free code editor, has been published, written using Free Pascal and Lazarus. The editor supports Python extensions and has a number of advantages over Sublime Text, for example. There are some features of the integrated development environment implemented as plugins. More than 300 syntax lexers have been prepared for programmers. The code is distributed in the MPL 2.0 license. Builds are available for Linux, Windows, Mac OS, FreeBSD, OpenBSD, NetBSD, Dragonfly BSD, Solaris, and Haiku platforms. Linux Mint 22.1 has been presented, continuing the development of the branch on the Ubuntu 24.04 LTS base. The distribution is fully compatible with Ubuntu, but differs significantly in its approach to organizing the user interface and the selection of default applications. The Linux Mint developers provide a desktop environment that corresponds to the classic canons of organizing the desktop, which is more familiar to users who do not accept the new methods of building the GNOME 3 interface. DVD builds on the Mate, Cinnamon, and XFCE desktops are available for download. The Linux Mint 22 branch is classified as a long-term support release, and updates will be generated until 2029. The free POS platform Cozy Stack 0.22.0 is available. The project aims to provide a ready-made platform for hosting providers and a framework for building private and public clouds. The platform is installed directly on servers and covers all aspects of preparing the infrastructure for providing managed services. Cozy Stack allows you to launch and provide Kubernetes clusters, databases, and virtual machines. The platform code is available on GitHub and is distributed on the Apache 2.0 license. Talos Linux and FluxCD are used as the base technology stack. Images with the system, kernel, and necessary modules are generated in advance and updated atomically, which allows one to do without such components as DKMS and a package manager, and guarantees stable operation. A simple installation method is provided in an empty data center using PXE and the Debian-like installer Talos-Bootstrap. The platform includes a free implementation of the network infrastructure, Fabric, based on Kubi-OVN, and uses Cilium for the service network and Metal LB to announce services to the outside. The storage is implemented on LinStore, which suggests using ZFS as a base layer for storage and DRBD for replication. There is a pre-configured monitoring stack based on Victoria Metrics and Grafana. To launch virtual machines, KubeVirt technology is used, which allows you to launch classical virtual machines directly in Kubernetes containers, and already has all the necessary integrations with the Cluster API to launch managed Kubernetes clusters inside a hardware Kubernetes cluster. The new version adds Cozy Stack-Controller and new entities, Workload and Workload Monitor, which allow you to monitor the state of pods managed by operators and evaluate the service level according to predefined rules. Applications in Cozy Stack are managed by different operators, so it was decided to create a single format for displaying the status of each service. Workload Monitor for collecting information about replicas and their health has been added to Kubernetes, Postgres, Monitoring, Virtual Machine, VM Instance, Redis, etc.d, and Seaweed FS applications. Cozy Stack Dashboard now displays the number of application replicas and the service level for each workload group. Alexander von Gluck, a board member of Haiku Inc., the nonprofit which oversees the development of the Haiku operating system, announced plans to block UK users from accessing the project's forum and other platforms where community interaction occurs. The decision is explained by the legal and financial risks arising from the Online Safety Act, which comes into force in the UK on March 16th. The project does not have the resources for legal analysis and bringing the infrastructure into compliance with the requirements of the law. Compliance with the requirements is complicated by the need to carry out a large volume of bureaucratic procedures associated with the preparation of documentation describing the processes and assessing the existing risks. The list of risks takes up 84 pages with confusing and ambiguous wording. The Online Safety Act was adopted in the UK but applies to websites operating outside the UK if they are considered UK-related, i.e. used by UK residents. It is assumed that without the involvement of lawyers, it is difficult to correctly fill out all the documents and comply with the requirements of the law. Ignoring the law creates significant risk. For example, a fine for violating the law may reach $22 million. In order to remove Haiku from the scope of the Online Safety Act, it has been decided to completely block access from the UK to the community interaction platforms, at least until another solution is found. In addition to the forum, the block will probably extend to the Garrett and Haiku Depot services, where comments are allowed. The Haiku website and the project repositories will not be blocked. The requirements of the Online Safety Act are related to moderating user-submitted content, removing content that violates UK laws, and restricting children's access to adult content. Sites with more than 700,000 users are required to monitor, filter, and scan user-submitted content, links, text, and images at the publishing stage. The requirements for others are limited to responding to complaints, but may also require conducting a risk analysis, appointing responsible parties, and creating a compliant handling policy. The law applies to sites that have a significant number of UK users, what is considered significant is not specified, or that provide services to UK citizens where there is a risk of harm to such citizens. An exception is provided for services that allow the publication of comments on authors' articles and their own content, but it does not specify whether sites that allow the publication of responses to other comments fall under the exceptions. The UUtils Core Utils 0.0.29 project has been published. The project develops an analog of the GNU Core Utils package written in the Rust language. Core Utils includes more than 100 utilities, including sort, cat, chmod, chown, chroot, cp, date, dd, and many others. The goal of the project is to create a cross-platform alternative implementation of Core Utils capable of working on Windows, Redux, and Fuchsia platforms. Unlike GNU Core Utils, the Rust implementation is distributed under the permissive MIT license instead of the copyleft GPL license. In addition, the same team of developers is developing analogs of the util-linux, diffutils, findutils, and bsdutils written in Rust. The Dillo 3.2.0 web browser has been released. The browser provides a tabbed graphical interface and supports HTML 4.01, CSS, and HTTPS, but has no JavaScript support. Dillo's functionality can be extended through plugins. There are plugins for the IPFS and Gemini protocols. When opening the start page, Dillo uses 12 megabytes of RAM, and the installation deb package takes up about 600 kilobytes. The graphical interface is built using the FLTK library. The project code is distributed under the GPL v3 license. You've been listening to Full Circle Weekly News. For more details, see the next issue of the magazine at fullcirclemagazine.org or check the links in the show notes. You can contact me at bardmoss@pm.me. I'll see you next week.